Hello, bonjour. My name is Paulo de Castro Reis, and I'm the Executive Director of CCBC. Welcome to the first Brazilian Week CCBC Online Festival, a digital event organized by the Chamber of Commerce Brasil-Canada, also known as CCBC, in partnership with the Brazilian Embassy in Canada and the Brazilian consulates in Toronto, Montreal, and Vancouver, and sponsored by Air Canada. The festival presents more than 20 webinars distributed in 3 different topics: business opportunities, innovation, and Brazilian culture. In this particular session, we will talk about a project that is very dear for us at CCBC, the action plan for the advancement of women in the Brazilian mining industry. I would like to start by calling Jamile Cruz, founder and CEO of IND 101 and director of Women in Mining Brasil, that will be the moderator of this panel. Welcome, Jamile.
Thank you, Paulo. Thank you, CCBC, for having us. It's a pleasure for myself and for Women in Mining Brasil to be part of the Brazilian Week Festival. So we appreciate the opportunity and we're very excited to be here today, actually with the launch in English of our action plan. And I appreciate you making this time and putting us into the agenda, because I think this connection between Brazil, Canada, it's what made possible for this action plan to be here today. And this is kind of a very important step for us. And the start of our conversation today will actually be with our senior trader, commissioner and consul in São Paulo, Elise Racico. She's gonna be walking us through kind of this opening and telling us why the government of Canada supported the development of this plan and Women in Mining Brazil. Elise, please.
Thanks, Jamile. Bonjour tout le monde. Hello, everyone. First, I'd like to join Jamile in thanking the CCBC for hosting this important event, but also just everyone who's interested and is listening in for your continued interest in the relationship between Canada and Brazil. So I think I'll start by saying that the mining sector is an important one in the relationship between Canada and Brazil, and I think most of you are probably already aware of that. I'm not going to go into the details of numbers and whatnot, but it's been traditionally both on the trade and investment side as well as on innovation, an area where we've had a lot of collaboration. Actually, I'd even go further and say that on the people-to-people front, it's also been a real anchor of our relationship. I think people like Jamile are a proof of that, for instance, as many others probably here today. People who create those links between our 2 countries, and that often came from the mining sector. So traditionally one that has been a really strong source of partnership between Canada and Brazil, and that continues to be. But I think the importance of specifically this action plan in such an important sector of our relationship goes a little bit beyond that. And I think I'd like to start by talking about why inclusion is so important for the government of Canada, and why diversity and inclusion in the mining sector. So diversity and multiculturalism, all of you, probably most of you are set in Canada, are aware that it's an important value for most Canadians and for the Canadian government, for our companies as well, for investors and clients of those companies as well. And we believe that it's only by including everyone that we will be able to maintain strong democracies and strong economies. And that applies also to the mining sector. A lot, and you'll hear probably again more about that today from more interesting speakers. But research shows that companies that have more diversity and inclusion at all levels of the organization usually tend to have a stronger commitment to transparency, responsible practice, sustainable development, and to also have a more efficient way of doing business, so often having more profits at the end of the day. So all those things are good for the economy, but they're also good for our common future. And we are committed as a government to the Sustainable Development Goals and to trying to make our world more sustainable and responsible. And we believe there's a role as well for Canadian companies to do that in their action abroad, in Canada and abroad, I should say. So again, I think more diversity and inclusion brings a certain level of that added to the companies who decide to make this decision, or to any kind of organization, government included, which is why we're also showing in our government how having more diversity and inclusion is important even within our ranks. With the markets, investors, clients, and the public in general, always asking for more environmental, sustainable, and governance, especially from the extractive sectors that are probably under even more pressure than any other sectors to show some results in terms of that responsible business conduct. A plan that helps the mining companies in getting a better structure to attain these goals, including more people and more diversity, is definitely part of the solution in our view. Industries and companies also need today to become more innovative, to maintain their competitivity, and diversity is also a way to do that. So we believe also that having a more diverse sector, having more diverse representativity within the ranks of those mining companies, flow of ideas and of different views to look at complex realities to find new solutions is likely going to be increased, and that's what the studies also say. So again, it's a sector that needs a lot of attention right now in terms of innovation from a trade perspective. And putting my senior trade commissioner cap on, I'd say that this is an area where we see a lot of collaboration also between Canada and Brazil in terms of clean tech, in terms of increasing the artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things and sensors and other technology within the mining supply chain. And so again, innovation being shown as an increased result when there's increased diversity. I think that's a good way to ensure that that this happens, to implement some of the recommendations that are part of this plan. To say that more generally, I think in all kind of development, we need to have the full potential of our citizens or of our employees, to the contribution of everyone to get the best results possible. And there's a lot of examples that we see that having more women present in the development of solutions really brings a lot of, as I mentioned, new solution, but also another way of looking at the issues. And that really helps to get to another level, basically. So it's a priority for Canada, as I mentioned, diversity and inclusion in our policies, in our programs, in our investments as well. And I won't go into detail there because I'm sure that you're also aware of those priorities. But just as an example, and maybe one that's more directly related to my own world, is our inclusive international trade inclusive policy. And so what it means is that we want to make sure that all groups of underrepresented groups, basically, so women, small enterprises, racially diverse companies, and all the different groups that are less represented in the international trade can also benefit from the economic advances that are being brought forward by free trade. So there's been a lot of growth over the last 10 to 20 years with the increase of trade liberalization, but there's also a bit of a backlash, if we'd like today. A lot of people looking at closing in the frontiers a little bit more because they don't see how this benefits them. And so we want to make sure that our view of international trade considers everyone and really brings benefits to everyone. So that's why we elaborate policies for our international trade that look at those elements, that look at sustainability and at inclusion, including specifically in our most recent trade agreements, articles that are specifically addressing this question of having women-owned enterprises more prominent and have a space of their own, so that they're ensured that they can participate also from the benefits of those free trade agreements. So that's just one example from my world, but I think this is one that's applicable, especially as we're looking at negotiating a free trade agreement with the region, including Brazil. So basically, inclusion is important to the Canadian government, and mining is important to the Canada-Brazil relationship. They're both really at the basis of our action, and they're at the basis of our priority. So nothing better than to be here today with great Canadian companies who are doing business here, with our local partner IBRAM, who's been doing an incredible work together with Women in Mining Brazil to adapt the action plan for the Brazilian context. And you'll hear more about that, but I just want to say, with actually new elements that make it even better, maybe, than the first iteration. So including on a woman-owned enterprise that I was just mentioning. So it's really exciting to see that this product is finally, not only that the commitment is there from the different companies involved, that it's growing, and not only with the big mining companies that are from Canada in Brazil, but also from other big Brazilian companies who are there. And so that the private sector is really interested in this and wants to be part of that solution, because again, as I mentioned before, these solutions need everyone to be involved. So government on its own is not going to make anything change. We can have like good policies, but unless companies work with us, I think we're not going to get where we want to. So I'm really grateful to see many Canadian and Brazilian companies and the local industry taking this at heart and making sure that there is an impact from this Women in Mining Action Plan. So thrilled that it's now available in English, and that maybe will be socialized with a broader group of Canadian companies that might look at this and think, this is something that we want to be a part of. So anyway, just, I don't want to take too much time, but I just wanted to mention that without this collaboration across the different elements of our society, it's going to be really difficult to get there. So I'm super excited to hear what our private sector colleagues are going to be saying today about this experience. And I just want to say that Jamili's work has been really fundamental in making this plan adopted and translated and the whole thing. So it's a real honor to be here with you today, and thanks for having the Canadian government present on this panel today.
Thank you, Elise. We appreciate you and the whole team from Canada and Brazil, because as we know, it's been a partnership and we wouldn't have gotten here without everybody's involvement. So definitely this project shows that working together, we get much farther than trying to get somewhere alone, right? Like, I think that's a big message from this project. I hope everybody can see my screen. What I will be taking you through today, the idea here, taking the words from Elise and really sharing some of the concepts and some of the learnings we had throughout this project and the involvement of government, private sector, and a few not-for-profit organizations. It's to really explain to you why Women in Mining Brasil was formed, talk about the goals that we have together with IBRAM for this action plan, and why organizations are making this commitment to implementing the action. So I'm gonna take you through some of the slides that explain this for the next 15 minutes, and then we're gonna kind of wrap up this whole webinar with a panel with 3 leaders from the industry, and hopefully have 10-15 minutes for your questions. So please write them down. We have a support team from CCBC who's going to be looking through your questions and sharing with us through the Q&A. Again, thank you so much, Elise, for being here with us and sharing this commitment from the Canadian government. Paulo has already introduced myself, but again, I'm here representing Women in Mining Brazil, also my company IND 101, and I'm also a director of Women in Mining Canada, who has graciously shared with us the Women in Mining Canada National Action Plan, which was kind of the inspiration and the source for what we put together in terms of a structure to put this program forward. Special thanks to CCBC, not only for hosting us today as part of this festival, but also because they contributed to the translation to English. This plan was originally done in Portuguese, so we're very happy to be able to provide the plan in English to companies who want to really engage with us. We saw that need based on the request from some of the Canadian companies operating in Brazil, but we see that this is a real opportunity to share across the globe. And also the government of Canada supported us through this translation. And a special shout out to Eveline Colomb. She finished her post in Brazil as the consul in Rio de Janeiro. She was a very special resource throughout this whole exercise, a leader that really showcased what leadership looks like when you're trying to put a project together that combines so many parts. So we're very excited to continue this work with Elise, who's been part of it as well. But I wanted to shout out to Eveline because she was a big help throughout this exercise. So Women in Mining Brazil, quickly, it's a movement that was formed in 2019 with the objective of expanding and strengthening the women's participation in the Brazilian mining sector. It's not a movement just in Brazil. There are tons of organizations with this Women in Mining title across the globe in countries where you see mining being a big part of the economy of those countries. Our value proposition is really to be seen, like for mining to be seen as a respectful work environment for women at all levels of the organization and professional backgrounds, where mining companies, suppliers, government, and academia foster the participation of all talent. We do have this question quite often, like why the focus on gender? And what we'd like to see is that gender just opens the door, and this whole discussion opens the door for a bigger conversation around our industry and society, where inclusive and diverse environments really create prosperity for our communities, not from just the gender diversity balances, but for everybody. Also, we want the equal participation not only in opportunities where are more traditional places for women within the industry. We want to expand that view and ensure that women seen as a source of technical expertise, operational excellence, innovation, and really moving this industry forward in a perspective of sustainability. For those who want to know more, please go to womeninminingbrasil.org. So it's wimbrasil.org. We also present on the LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. So we have a beautiful website. I'll be talking and thanking quickly the people who supported us putting this together. But yeah, all the information, including the download of the action plan in English and in Portuguese, are there. How did we get here? So we had conversations starting all the way back in 2018. And throughout the past year and a half, we had multiple sessions, multiple discussions, and the creation of this working group essentially that involved government, private companies, and everybody who's part of the mining ecosystem, I would say, in Brazil, to really form a plan that people are engaged and ready to take on. And as you can see here at the bottom, heavily inspired out the National Action Plan published by Women in Mining Canada, we launched the Portuguese version on the 15th of April 2020. We're prepared to launch, coming out after the pre-launch that happened at the DAC this year in March. But as you know, the world entered this pandemic that I think, I was telling a few people, I don't know how this guide would look exactly if we had the pandemic prior to publishing. I think there are a few chapters that it would definitely be changed or given even more of a highlight, because we talk about flexible workplaces and changes that needs to be done from an inclusion of women when we were talking about these policies. And I think we all saw that mining can transition into being more inclusive of women, and how much of the work can actually be done from home, which I think there were a few barriers there in the past that we can get over it now. And I think with the pandemic, with COVID-19, the damage to the progress that women has made in the workplace for the past few years. We know now from the studies that are coming up that it's been kind of one step forward, 100 steps backwards. So there is even a bigger need for companies and private organizations and government to get involved and really establish the gender agenda as a priority for us to move forward. Can't go any further without thanking our partners. So IBRAN, who is represented in this call today by Paulo Henrique, and he's going to be talking to us in a minute. Fundação Vale and Vale, so Vale Foundation and Vale were key to make this happen. IND 101 is the company I represent. We took over for the development of this exercise, and we had full support of the Government of Canada, Women in Mining Canada, Mining Hub, which we call as kind of our home in Brazil, BCCC, CCBC, and ABM-GEL, which is the Association of Women in Geoscience, who took kind of our hands from the beginning and has been walking with us through this path. And the government of UK as well has been involved from the beginning, supporting us. They were a big support on our launch of the Portuguese version, and I hope they're watching us and support us now on the launch of the English version. Special thanks as well to RHI Magnesita, who kindly, right there at the beginning of the formation of Women in Mining Brasil, shared the resources with us for the setup of our branding, which you can see kind of this beautiful logo at the bottom right corner. They supported throughout this exercise when we didn't even know where to start, they were there. William Freire, which is a law firm, also supported us on the building of our beautiful website. And the other companies that you see here at the bottom, including AGIMBI, which is the agency for the technology development of the mining industry in Brazil, Artemis, which is a collective of women leaders, entrepreneurs offering service to mining, Cambria College, which is a college that has focus in mining in Sudbury here in Canada, and We Connect, that really connect organizations led by women to big organizations. We're all very supportive of the development of this plan. Here, I wanted to make a special thanks, and for those who are calling us from Canada or connecting from Canada, there is an action plan, which is the NAP, the National Action Plan for Canadian mining employers, which was published back in 2016 with the support of the government, Women in Gender Equality Canada, which was formerly known as Status of Women. They published this guide. It was a kind of a 3-year work plan where they connected with the industry, really understood the changes they needed to make, tried a few things, and then published this beautiful guide that's like super helpful. There's so much information in there for the Canadian organizations and global organizations who haven't seen this document. Similar to ours, really has the intention of supporting companies who are not quite sure where to start or what to do to get to that concept of gender inclusion. So both are great resources for you to go and research. So what's in the action plan? The action plan was created to give executives and people, professionals in mining in general, and I say mining because that's the focus of us here today, but I believe this guide can be shared across industries. It has a lot of information that's really supportive of really understanding how to implement actions that will drive towards results. So definitely the numbers are a bit more focused in mining, but everything else from the setup of a business case to the discussion around setting targets, to the 8 strategies itself, to this question that I feel like I get a lot of times of where to we start, and building a diversity and inclusion strategy that really drives towards culture change. We touched on all these points. Again, it's an 84-page document. It's not trying to get you through a full design and development and understanding of every single detail that you need to consider. Think about this as really a guide for you to start understanding and having the right conversations in your organization. And a big topic that it's part of it, and I appreciate everybody who is calling and having this conversation with the men in the organizations. We do have the engaging men because we get this question quite often. It's like, women in mining, is that only for women? It's not. We need the men to be part of it. We need everybody to engage on the discussions around gender equality and inclusion, because if not, we're not going to see the changes we need. Okay, talking about the numbers where we are today. So we did a survey with members from IBRAN, and we got to this, that we're approximately 13% participating women in the Brazilian mining industry today, when our labor market's around 44%. Yes, we understand there is probably a few specialties in STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and math disciplines required in mining that you might not see that large population of women available to take those roles. But I think we can also all agree that 13% is much lower than the reality of what we know mining roles are in the places where you could essentially have women. So if we start then digesting that number and understanding why we're so far from that 44%, we can start seeing that knowledge and understanding of how to move that dial. It's a conversation that we need to continue to have and be more active towards changing. So part of the questions we also shared with organizations in the survey was around kind of the maturity of where they are within their inclusion diversity curve. So here we can see that communication and information around the diversity goals and composition of the workforce was still not where we needed to be. That's 100%. We're still kind of halfway there, with a lot of organizations still not sharing that information or not really using that information, as the second kind of ground graph here shows, where the companies are not analyzing the data on demographics around compensation, recruiting, promotion, meaning how do you get really informed to be able to remove biases from the systems when you're not really doing that full assessment and understanding what's happening with the women who joins and who leaves the organizations and how they're spread across the workforce. So instead of showing the results from the McKinsey's and our other consulting firms and governments and different associations, I decided to show here the actual results from a mining organization. So for those who have been following BHP, back in 2016, put this aspiration of achieving gender balance by 2025. Throughout this commitment, what they're able to start showing us now, and you can Google, this is not just on my slides, it's an open data from BHP. So if you Google BHP gender equation, you're gonna see that they have this information being shared. So when people ask like, what is the correlation, or how can you say that gender inclusion actually improves organizations, you can see here that they're starting to show us directly in mining, with delivering benefits on the safety side, so 67% lower TRIF, having a better culture, with 21% of the people within the organization saying now that they have a greater pride in working for the organization, and being more productive. So 11% better adherence to work schedules. So when you think about this and you think about the changes that are possible to be made, right? If you look at the boxes on the right side, within a few years, they're able to do like this big jump on women's participation by putting a target, by committing to a goal. So I really challenge all of you who are watching to go into their websites, watch their videos, watch their information that's coming out, so you can first inform your organizations and really have like tangible examples that you can share. So coming to the details on these strategies, as Elise said, we have 8 of them, with 5 of them being really this focus about the changes within industry, within the organizations. And the 3 additional strategies that we added to this action plan was really around supplier diversity, which we see as key for us to continue to drive the involvement and development of women in our societies and within the industry. Number 7, being the investment in the women who are part of our communities. Data from the World Bank shows how those responsible investment dollars, when used directed to women, have great benefits to the communities where we have operations like mining, oil and gas. And also the commitment from the organizations in terms of developing the talent for the future, right? So when we talk about, they're not there, I think companies need to start to look into their overall resourcing plan and look into the future and see how they're going to help developing those resources that we need for the future of mining. So really that investment on girls and women in terms of STEM related disciplines is really important conversation. So based on the survey and based on the discussions, part of what you're going to see on the action plan as well is this idea around an approach to cultural change using lessons that we already have within the industry. So an example would be the health and safety. Yes, we need to recognize that there is a long way still for us to go in terms of fixing and improving health and safety policies and commitments within mining. But the idea is that we need resources, we need investments, we need change that is supported. And when we say that gender inclusion or inclusion diversity is a priority for organizations, if I go and ask, okay, so where's the investment, where are the plans, where's the strategy, who is your senior sponsor from leadership, that all those answers can be on the table. So this is just that reference to understand that we can see change expecting to happen organically or based on volunteer work of some of our very invested resources that we actually need to put the money on the table. So what each strategy brings in terms of getting to these lessons, it's really explaining to you the why. So why is this important? What are some of the benefits that you can expect to see when you implement those actions? What are the actions that can actually bring you some of those benefits? And examples, because we do need to recognize that some companies are moving and leading towards gender inclusion. So we do have great examples within the Brazilian market. And those examples can really teach you on what has been done in the past, what are the lessons learned, and what we need to really do to move forward. And we made a point to actually put names and actual people in those conversations, so you can actually reach out to that organization and say, hey, I've heard you're doing great, so can you share some of those things with us? And what I've learned within inclusion diversity work is that people are really willing to share, and that's the environment we want to foster in the Brazilian mining industry, for people to come together, share those lessons, and ensure that we're really learning from each other and moving this bar forward. I'm not going to go into the details of each one of these strategies, because I can see here I'm getting to the end of my time, and I want to have the time to have a good conversation with the leaders who are joining us today. But this is a snapshot of what you're going to see. So from all those points that I just made here, the why, the benefits, the how, and the examples, for each one of these strategies, you're going to see that information coming through, and hopefully that's going to be an easy way for you to digest why are we doing this, what we're trying to achieve, and how your organization can essentially commit to make the changes. So one of the tools that throughout the conversations we had in this year of development was the need to have a call to action and to actually have a direct commitment coming from the organizations towards this change. So what we created, it's really this letter of commitment where companies are saying, and usually company CEO are the ones who are signing this letter to say, I commit to the change, I'm gonna work with you to implement the strategies presented in this plan and make the improvements that we want to see throughout the industry. Funny enough, throughout this whole exercise, and we're going to be talking to Paulo about this, IBRAN, at Expos IBRAN last year, published a letter of commitment to the society, like from the mining industry. And our letter, our action plan fits very well within this scope. But this is the idea here, that we get organizations to commit, and we're going to, as part of the work of Women in Mining Brasil, together with IBRAN and with all of you, hopefully, who are watching and getting your companies organized and engaged, to actually follow the progress, to continue to engage and learn from each other and actually see the results of what we're trying to achieve here. So to date, what we're able to achieve is that 12 companies, and you're seeing their logo on the screen, have agreed to implement the plan. So if you haven't signed yet, please reach out to WIM Brasil, reach out to us, and we're going to have the conversations, the required conversations, and explain what does it mean to your organizations. But the idea here is to really get everybody working together, and we're soon we'll be announcing, fingers crossed. We're working through the contracting part and really alignment of what we're trying to achieve, but we're going to bring a few partners to help us throughout the development, really talking about the indicators and getting to that point where we can agree how we're going to be tracking the progress made through of this action plan throughout the industry. And then next steps for us, it's really to continue to engage the industry. So not only mining companies that we want to see in this, hopefully it's not going to be fitting anymore into one slide. It's going to be multiple slides and multiple types of organizations, but we want to talk to suppliers. We want to talk with the professional associations that are part of the mining ecosystem. Also, as I mentioned, we're going to set up this work to validate the KPIs and figure out what's the best way to monitor the progress we're making. We're going to develop partnerships to enable this knowledge sharing and activate our membership. So we have tons of professionals who reach out, who said they want to be actively involved. We're also going to do a sponsorship drive to support our activities. Me and a few, or all the directors and the people who are putting their hands up to participate are on a volunteer basis. So we understand that for this to become a sustainable movement that we can really push towards progress, we're going to have to figure out how to make this operational in the long term. So yes, we will be talking to organizations to try to get this out of the ground. And really this idea of development, the leadership for the future. So we're going to be working with organizations like we had a few weeks ago, a consulting firm joining us to do a development exercise with some of our members who sign up for the webinar. The idea is to really roll out workshop series with industry leaders, sharing lessons and really getting people engaged, forming committees to develop our understanding and develop the critical items that we need to move forward. So without further ado, I'm going to stop being here on my own. I'm going to introduce Ben and then close my presentation so we can all see our faces and work together on this. But the idea here is to bring these leaders to a table, and we're going to have a chat about where we are today, where we're going next, how the action plan helps all of us. So from my left to the right, I have Sofia Tsakos. She's the Senior Vice President, General Counsel and Corporate Secretary for Yamana Gold. Paulo Henrique Soares, he's the Director of Communications at IBRA, the Brazilian Mining Associations, and Gilberto Azevedo, who is the President of Kinross Brasil Mineração. And we're going to have a quick chat here. So let me stop sharing. And I think you can all kind of unmute and come on the screen now. I can see Paulo. There you go, Gilberto, say hi. And
hello there.
Sofia, I think I saw her earlier. There she is. My screen is not showing all of you in one box, but I see all of you now. So yeah, thank you very much for being here, all of you. We had a previous chat and, you know, kind of our intentions is really get people understanding why we're making this commitment and where we're going next. So maybe I'll start with you, Paulo, if you can share a little bit more about your work with IBRA and the relationship to Women in Mining Brasil, and really walk us through this commitment and the letter of commitment to society that was published last year during Expo IBRA and how that connects with the work that I just presented here today.
Okay, thank you, Jamil. Thank you very much, and congratulations to the great job you and the group of Women in Mining Brazil have been done in this past months. It's incredible the great advance you have had and the great achievements you have accomplished. As you said, IBRA has launched a letter of commitment to the society, to the Brazilian society, with 12 points that we address the main issues in mining. And one of the points is about inclusion and diversity. So we are very committed to the work and the plan you have shown. And we actually are working with our associates, the mining that are associated to IBRA, to be part of this movement and actually to engage and actually do. The plan is ready, the plan is well done, but now we need an action. And the plan is absolutely nothing if you don't have an action. So what we're calling is all the mining companies to look this as an opportunity to work with diversity and to work with inclusion in their operations, not only in their corporate areas, but also especially in their operation. So as a member of WIM, we are very, very proud to be supportive of this initiative and to know that we can get better results, not only economical, but socially and also psychological, adopting this work plan. So congratulations, and you can always count on IBRAM to support this type of initiative.
Thanks, Paulo. We appreciate the support. And I think one of the key things that I think is worth sharing is how, as you said, this agenda quickly moved and now it's really part of everything that we do, right? From the Mineração, an event that I think is the last big event for mining that IBRAM put together. So I think that cascading of the commitment and being part of the agenda for every step of the way, it's really becoming a reality. And we appreciate your efforts on this as well and IBRAM support. So maybe I'll move to Gilberto now. And Gilberto, thanks for being here. Kinross, I've even talked to a few of your resources today because we're talking about the signature of the letter. Making this commitment became, I think, very clear, and Kinross was a big pusher, nice pusher of getting the English version together. Talk to us about why you're making this commitment now. What does it mean to Kinross today, and kind of where we go from here?
Thank you, Jamil. Bonjour, good afternoon, boa tarde a todos. Jamil, I believe when you present the statistics, you presented the reasons. The sector, mine sector by itself, has a very low participation of women, as you mentioned, around 30%. And in our case in Brazil, Brasil, the women account only with 11%. The situation is a little bit better when we refer to our directors. There we jump for around 30%, but it's not, again, good enough. So join the effort with IBRAM and Brasil-Only Mining is a good way to pursue the transformation that we did. In this process, we intend to count with support from consultants to help us to conduct an assessment and also to draw an action plan. I believe it's important to mention that one of the first things that we need to focus on is really get a good understanding of ourselves and why it happened. You mentioned the market per se, but there is also other reasons, maybe a lot of unconscious bias. So we need to get this better understanding because we need to conduct this transformation with and through our team. And in that process, we need to stop, assess, and reflect about the data that we'll be able to collect. We expect with this process to build a company that will become more efficient and more just. And we are very excited because we foresee a lot of opportunity in this process. We for sure will become an even strong company.
Thanks, Gilberto. I appreciate that. And I think that's a great segue to Sophia, who is here representing Yamana. And I think some of this process that Gilberto just mentioned, that looking at the action plan kind of generated this need of creating their own action plan internally. I think my conversation with Sophia and Yamana really shown this, that putting a document like the action plan in front of organizations similar to the requests that are coming from investor groups and other ESG requirements, it's really putting that in the overall agenda for these activities in the organization. So maybe Sophia, you can kind of intro us on some of these assessments that you're making and comparing kind of the requests from the action plan to other changes that the organization is making towards sustainable development, and how that conversation is going within kind of the Yamana sites.
Mm-hmm. Sure, thank you. So like many of our peers, like Yamana is also internally looking at its diversity. we actually have already implemented diversity policies, diversity statements, procedures, and are really looking to advance this over the next several years. We've had success. It's been about 3 years that we've had some good success in our numbers with women, but it's like everywhere else, it's not enough. Over the years, you know, the laws are changing as well, with women generally in companies, both in directors and in senior management positions. There's also in many countries, you know, disability guidelines and policies on the numbers that you need to have in your companies. So you know, Yamana is following all of this. We're in many jurisdictions, as you know, and it's not just law, but it's our partners, our rating agencies, our investing community. Everyone is coming up with standards that they would like to see companies in which they invest have in terms of women generally and diversity overall. So what Yamana is in the middle of doing, and it has kept this a little less organized, but is building out a matrix of all of these things that are coming from all our various stakeholders on what we need to do, so that we know you know, how to build out an overall plan. That's how we're looking at it. You know, this initiative comes from the top. Our mine in Jacobina is well in progress on doing what it needs to do to attract and retain women. But the initiative can't happen unless it's initiative from the top. And at Yamana, I certainly can say, because I sit at that table, that there is a strong commitment to support the initiative, to support, you know, this action plan and the principles around the action plan. And we're, you know, we're just building all of the analysis and all of the evidence, you know, to show the senior leadership team that there is positive things that come out from women employed and diversity generally. You know, we have women who drive our big trucks, and the safety record for the women is extremely high and positive. So these are very obvious things that that we're seeing and want to continue to implement in our company.
Yeah, I think that's important to recognize that some of these examples, as posted by you, like the women driving trucks, and I guess similar to what I just showed at BHP, we have those numbers and we have those examples. And I think a big exercise, as I mentioned, of this action plan, it's for companies to come forward with some of those positive stories, and hopefully some of the negative as well, so we can learn and really understand what works, what doesn't, right? So sharing best practice and really creating working groups. And I think I'll go back to Paulo with this concept of working groups, because that's how IBRAN is proposing to work into every single commitment of this letter of commitment to society, where they're creating working groups led by various members within the list of members of IBRAN to really move towards with the contribution and with the work of this organization. So Paulo, if you can kind of take us a little bit more on how this working groups will really proceed, and how we get involved, or how companies who are listening, who wants to get involved in the inclusion diversity portion, can get involved with this path.
Okay, thank you, Jamil. It was very nice to see you, Gilberto and Sophia, and to hear all the work you've been doing. That's quite important and great work. We have decided to, you know, the letter is dividing 12 topics, so that's why we have 12 groups. And each group is led by a volunteer company, and it's addressed to someone in the company to actually start in this discussion. So you just have to reach to one of us at IBRAN, and we'll connect with you if you're interested in this discussion. Because from this letter of commitment, we have 12 commitments, and now we have targets, and we have an action plan. And that's how things go. And so it would be very important to have people on board talking to us, participating, and having the chance to discuss with all their peers in order to get to a goal and to get to a reasonable action plan. We'll have an internal seminar on the 22nd, 23rd, and 24th of September, where we'll dedicate it about 2 hours for each working group, where they will show the advances and their proposal in order for us to get a final working plan and especially a final goal, or different goals for each commitment that we have signed a year before. So we're it will be very interesting to see the results of this internal seminar that we'll have in about 2 weeks. And before getting back to you, Jamil, I just want to say that people might be wondering, if we have all the numbers, if we have all the data, so how come, the numbers of women in this position specifically is not higher than what we expected? I would say that it has to be with culture, and I'm not talking about Brazilian culture, I'm talking about the culture itself and the aspect of changing. Everybody loves changing, at least, they love changing if I don't have to change. So changing is a concept people really get into. But if I personally have to change, that's a problem. So we want to all see changes, but we don't want to change. And that's why we have to change. Actually, to accept, we have to move into actions and to do the change right now.
Thanks, Paulo. I appreciate you putting that out there, because I wrote articles about this and would love for Sophia and Gilberto to talk about how that operates within the organizations. But one of the things that we've been hearing for a while, for sure, within the mining, it's like this concept around organic change. And I think from what Sophia presented with like 3 years around on the grinding already of implementing different things. And we talked about not just for women, but people with disabilities as well, and like the work that it's required to really make the cultural changes to include people, because we don't want just to have a spike on the numbers and increase of the numbers of women, but we want their experience to be a good one, right? We want them to want to stay within your organizations and within mining, and we want to see that change. So maybe if you can both comment as well on what Paulo put on the table, because it is about that personal commitment as well as the company commitment to actually get to that cultural change. So maybe Sophia, you first.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, no, I'm extremely proud to actually talk about what we do at Jacobina. It's one of the first mines that we've put in place a women's sustainable diversity program, and they were given the task of implementing and even participating in the creation of the policies that we have at Yamana. And they facilitate more women and greater diversity generally and inclusion overall at the mine. So we've packaged it to be something more than women, to include diversity. But like you said earlier in your presentation, we try to push women, and then with that, we hope it leads into things like diversity. And so that's what we're doing at Yamana. So the committee, they look at the recruitment strategies that we have. They make sure that all the job postings are gender neutral language, so that when people are looking at them, they feel that they can apply to them, that they have qualifications, and they're not reading something that really feels like it's not a job for them. The Human Resource Department is also committed to make sure that whenever we have a vacant job, that the positions that are, the people that are presented, the short lists of people that are presented for those jobs always includes a female. So these are some proactive things that they're doing. But once you have the women there, how do you keep them, right? Because historically, a mine site is not somewhere that made a woman comfortable. So I think with the numbers having increased over the last 3 years, like we've doubled the number of women in Jacobina over the last 3 years. So with numbers, I think comes some power. And so we're seeing that make some real changes at the site. So now what we're seeing is like our equipment, our facilities, change rooms, flexible schedules, like all of these things that are accommodating are being done at the site. And it makes it so it's not only easier to then attract additional women to come because there are lots of more women and there are facilities that are female friendly. Now more people are feeling that they can come and work at the mine. So I think with numbers comes the increase. And so we're starting to see that. We're seeing how it's multiplying year after year, and we're hoping that we do things to continue to keep that trend. And at Yamana, and in particular Jacobina, what they've done is it's not just about diversity, and I think you've mentioned this earlier as well, it's not just about diversity of women at the site, but it's also about diversity of women in your supply chain. So, you know, women have particular clothing needs at the mine. We don't fit into the uniforms and the equipment like the standard male that we had provided. So what the committee did was sourced female-owned entrepreneurs in the communities of Jacobina to help assist to create clothing and equipment for the females. So that's another very positive thing that helps engage the community as well, and females in the community. And then one very positive thing that came to my attention that was in particular for COVID was not necessarily women, but on the diversity and inclusion front was we have a number of people with a hearing disability. And so when COVID hit, you know, we were all wearing masks. The problem with that, of course, is if you have a hearing disability, you need to be able to read someone's lips to be able to hear and understand. So not just the committee, but it was the people that those with the disabilities are working with, and there's multiples, came together with the assistance of the committee, and they created a mask that was like a plastic see-through, so that when you're talking, you can read someone's lips. So that was yet another beautiful thing that we saw happen through this committee and the support of the people. But I think what's more important that we're seeing at the mine is, you know, although there is this committee that people kind of call to if they need some support, we're seeing people really using it and wanting to use it and coming up with ideas and solutions to problems that they're seeing at the site. And it's both men and women. And so that's one very promising thing that we're seeing at the site, is that it is also the support of the male contingent at the site that is wanting all of this change for their mothers and their sisters and their girlfriends and their, you know, and their families. So it's very positive. And, you know, I have to shout out or give a lot of the compliments to our general manager, because he is supporting the team there to be able to feel like they can actually make the suggestions and think about solutions and implement the solutions. And so our general manager really does reflect the Yamana way right from the senior leadership team in Toronto. And so that support really has filtered down all the way to the mine site at Jacobina.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing all of that, because I think some of the points that you made there that I love to comment, it's like this culture of being able to speak up, right? And having that contingency of women or enough people around you that can share those thoughts and be able to like make changes. And I think that's one big thing that we need to think through, because I don't think I've talked to mining companies this year yet who hadn't had a problem with infrastructure required to host women in their sites. So when we talk about the action plan and we talk about the condition and maturity of gender inclusion within mining, we're still talking about the basics, right? So the examples around PPE and facilities and this whole chicken and egg concept around, but we need to have enough women to justify the investment in washrooms or whatever. I just wish we could stop that, right? It's a conversation that I have constantly with the government of Canada. It's like, if you want to help, put it on the table that it's no longer okay. Like if you're operating, you need to have the facilities to host women on our sites and other underrepresented groups as well, right? Make sure that they're accessible and all of that. So I think those basic steps that requires a movement like Women in Mining Brazil, and requires challenges to the system for us to really move that bar. It's why we're here, because unfortunately the story is not every site, and I would say the vast majority of them today still are not set, they're not fit for our people to be operating within them. So thanks for sharing those stories, and that's kind of the collaboration that we want to hear, like what stories should we be copying and what things that we need to do. And Sandro for sure helped through the development of the action plan, and for those who read through strategy 3, I think 3 is exactly what we're talking about here, and it has the example of Yamana in there. So talking about underrepresented groups, I just wanted to move to Gilberto quickly, because one of the things that happened this year throughout the world, I think we're watching, and for sure it started with some of the killings of Black people in the US, but I think it's a reality, unfortunately, in many other countries. It's not like racism and anti-Black racism is not just an issue within the US, it's an issue elsewhere. And when we talk about Women in Mining Brazil, I think we've been challenged by many people, and I think it's very important for us to talk and recognize that there are intersectionalities that make life for women, when we're talking about Black women and Indigenous women, much more difficult than treating women as a one group. And Kinross here in Canada signed the pledge from Black North, which is essentially a commitment similar to the commitment we're talking around the action plan for Women in Mining Brazil, around policies and changes within the culture of organization to really accept and engage and make the changes required to have people of our backgrounds participating, and especially Black people participating on the workforce in an inclusive way. So Gilberto, if you can share a little bit of this commitment made in Canada, how that impacts your organization here in Brazil, and what you're expecting to see out of it.
Jamile, I'd like to say first that our company has a very strong commitment to equality, inclusion, and diversity. And also that this commitment is fully translated in our Code of Business Conduct and Ethics. That said, there is a reconnaissance that there is a lot to be done yet, especially on, I would say, work and training on the unconscious bias. And in this training process is one of the areas that will be focused more and refer more to Brazil and Paracatu specifically in the coming months. And reason for that is because we need to have our team with us, everyone that work with us. And we need to talk about that and build from there. But again, our company is fully committed with equality, inclusion, and diversity. And we need to work with our team as a whole, and I refer to around 4,000 people. We need to see that reflecting the action of each one in a daily basis.
Thank you. And it's one of the initiatives that we're seeing here in Canada, and I would love to see that moving to Brazil as well. Maybe Elise, if you're there, it's the next project we'll tackle, bringing Black North to be like the Black South. I think it's a very important discussion to be held, and maybe we'll move into that. And thanks for coming up, Elise. I actually have a question that's associated with what Sophia said before, that I know it's your passion, which is the supplier diversity. We actually spent time during Expo Zibran talking to different mining organizations around supplier diversity, and I had the pleasure of representing Canada on that discussion, and Elise was a big part of it. Sophia and Yamana Gold actually signed kind of a sponsorship agreement with Artemis Project, which I love to say here, I'm part of it, and I'm excited to see Yamana really showcasing that commitment towards women entrepreneurship and really putting kind of the dollars there to support this development. I guess for all of you, but maybe we'll start with Elise, kind of the participation of women from changes on the supply chain and the whole ecosystem of mining, right? Recognizing this expertise and innovation that comes with leaders who are women, who are in this space, and sometimes have a very difficult time in getting to that decision makers table to really sell their services and have those connections. What are things that you're seeing that are really changing that game? And maybe the two of you can comment, since you're involved in projects that are making those changes.
Actually, I really like the example that Sophia gave about the garments. I'm thinking, you know, there are companies in Canada, and I'm thinking like Cover Gals, for example. That's a good example, who does garment for the mining industry that are designed for women. I think that, you know, these are examples that are, I think, really, really relevant to getting also more women working in mining companies to a certain extent, by having a more inclusive workplace and tools and whatnot. So that's one part of it. I also think that's a way to sometimes speed up the process in terms of commitment. You know, you talked, Jamili, about the importance of the pipeline to get more women studying in fields that eventually will be able to join the ranks of mining company. And if you don't have maybe 10 years in advance, you know, that kind of effort, it's sometimes difficult to get women at all levels of your company. That being said, getting in your supply chain some women-owned enterprise is a really, I think, interesting way to speed up that process of bringing diversity in a way without necessarily being stuck in this conundrum of having to wait until you have enough people who are at the right level of education so that you can bring them on board of your company. So it's a good segue, I think. It's also for us as the Government of Canada a real commitment that we have to help Canadian women-owned entrepreneurs. So to make sure that, sorry about that. Oh, okay, I'm back. A little connection issue, sorry. So it's also a good way, I think, to make sure that, as I mentioned, that these groups were underrepresented. When you look at women-owned companies in Canada, they're usually, you know, they don't usually export as much as their counterpart that are owned by men. And so if we want to make sure that we get the best out of our international trade, we want to make sure that women-owned companies also are part of that. So bringing them on board of value chains of important Canadian exports and imports, such as mining industry, represents, I think that's an excellent way to do that. So this is one of the reasons why we're so attached to this question. We have a lot of programs as well for women-owned companies, whether it's through the Trade Commissioner Service or Export Development Canada, or the bank, the Business Development Bank of Canada, and others. So if anyone here is interested, I'm happy to pass on more information afterwards. But yeah, we definitely see this as a good way to make sure that trade is more inclusive as well in all sectors and industries, and definitely a way to speed it up in the mining industry. And I'll just say on your call to action for Black North, I think we can definitely discuss. I think inclusion doesn't stop there. You know, inclusion is a process where, you know, you need to always look in different corners. Where are the groups that are underrepresented, and how can you bring them on board? So yes, let's continue to discuss on that. I'm sure that we'll find a way.
Yes, we're gonna find a way. Thanks, Elise. Before I move to all of you, and sorry, Sophia, I just look at the time check here, and we have 5 minutes. Caroline Mansour put a question on the chat there about women in mining being open to undergrad projects. 100%. Like, you have my information throughout the website from CCBC, so feel free to reach out. I think Julia, who's our Director of Communications, is also participating on the chat. So if you give your information and find Julia and message her, she can reach out to you as well. And if anybody has any questions, please put on the chat. We're going to try to address it. But to use these last 4 minutes now wisely, first I want to thank everybody who is here, and CCBC for sure for hosting us, all of you for the willingness of spending this time with us this afternoon and participating on the prep calls and really being committed to gender inclusion. throughout the organization and throughout the steps. Elise, for sure, thanks for being here with us. Sophia, Gilberto, Paulo, we look forward to continue to working with you. And before, for everybody who's watching as well, before we get cut, like there are tons of other sessions were super interesting within the Brazilian week. So please join other sessions now that you register. I think you only have to register once and participate many times. So maybe I'll give the words to each one of you to say, like, I think we already talked about the importance of women in mining Brazil, but like, what do you see in the future, and kind of a message to your peers, essentially, like leaders in the industry and outside of the industry who haven't searched for this information yet or committed to gender inclusion and inclusion diversity as a whole. What would you say to them?
I can start. I just say there's no way around. You either do it or you'll be forced to do it. So let's do it with more time and more planning.
Sophia?
Sure, that's very true. I think one thing to say is, if it was to be short, it's very easy to do. This is not a very difficult thing to do. There are more and more women that are qualified, and in particular in mining. And I think that always was the historical argument that we cannot find enough qualified women to take some of these roles. But I think our universities are training more and more women for roles like this. And so long as companies are able to provide the resources and the tools at site for them to do the job, I think that this is a very easy thing for companies to accomplish.
Thank you, Gilberto.
It's something necessary, and it's the right thing to do. We must do it, and we will do it together.
Yeah, using the words of our Prime Minister here in Canada, it's not only the right thing to do, but it's the smart thing to do. So, Elise, maybe then I'll give you the last 2 minutes here. Thank you again, all of you, for participating. And if, Elise, if you don't mind closing for us as well, and maybe talking about kind of the value of women in mining Brazil and what you see going forward and how we continue working together on this project.
Thanks, Jamili. I think actually I will join my voice to my colleagues here on the panel. I think, as was said, it's the right thing to do, and it's better to do it on your own terms and to be a leader and to show your commitment and leadership to the general population, to the communities you're working in, to your employees, to your investors, rather than being told that you need to do it and that you're late in implementing those changes. So I think you have more, as a company, you have more power over it if you're taking it as a priority and putting it forward. So definitely good examples here that we have, and inspiring ones. So I'd like to also thank everyone who was here today and took the time to discuss this important theme. As I said at the beginning, I think it's a partnership. Government is definitely interested in this. I think society is, but the private sector has many of the keys to making it happen. And so it's really exciting to see companies such as yours taking on this important commitment. And I'd like to thank you not only for being there, but for being there for the implementation of this plan and for the whole voyage, if you'd like, that it takes for transforming an industry to make it better, to make it more efficient, to make it more transparent, responsible, and sustainable. So I think this is a great initiative. And so thanks to everyone involved and to everyone interested here today who joined us through this webinar. So a pleasure being here again.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everybody. I appreciate your time, and watch the other webinars and join WIM Brasil at wimbrasil.org. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.